What was the best worth it detention in school? Story 1. A girl I had a major crush on passed me a note, and when the teacher saw that, she told me to bring it to her, but I flat out told her no. I was sent to the office and I read it on the way just in case I had to give it up. The note basically said she was falling in love with me and wanted to know if I felt the same. Edit. I never lost the note/letter. Yes, we dated and it was amazing. The sad part is that her father got a job in another state and she had to move. We tried to stay connected back then. It was the late 90s, but it ultimately didn't work. It was becoming painful for both of us and we just lost contact. A few years ago, I found out she was alive and doing well. I'm happily married to a wonderful woman now, and there's nothing I would do to change that. My ex and I had our time together and it caused us both to grow emotionally. I don't think I'd be the person I am now if not for that experience. So I say once more, worth it. Story 2. Some kid was stealing money out of the locker room every day after school while sports teams were practicing. I skipped cross-country practice one day and hid in the shower area in an attempt to catch them. After waiting for over an hour, I finally heard someone enter. I didn't know what I would be up against, so I had taken my belt off as some sort of makeshift weapon. Just made me feel safer. Suddenly, I hear the sound of Velcro separating, and I knew I had finally caught him. I ran out of the locker area and he flung the wallet in his hands away and immediately pretended to be opening a lock on the locker. The culprit was this tiny 8th grader. Junior high was connected to the high school. As he sat there fumbling with the lock, I just stood and waited. Finally, when it was clear to him that he wasn't fooling me and that he didn't know the combination of the locker he was trying to open, he looked up at me. I started yelling at him, telling him how many people wanted to kick his ass. The wallet he was opening was one of my friends who was in an open gym close by. I told him to wait there unless he wanted trouble and got my friend. Ultimately, we started trying to extort the money he had stolen over the last few weeks with threats, because we were concerned that if we turned him in, we wouldn't see a dime. Finally, the kid turned himself in because he didn't have any of the money left, a way to make the money, and was legitimately concerned we were going to hurt him. The discipline lady said that I can do what I did and she was glad, but I couldn't take the law into my own hands. Later on, she stated that she must give me detention for this. She asked why I didn't turn him in, so I answered her honestly. So she asked us to get a list together and made the parents pay up. All in all, totally worth it. Story 3. I went to a K-8 Catholic school. Our school lunches were pitiful small, same portion for 1st graders as for 8th graders. The lunch ladies understood that the portions were small and would often let students get second servings, which they were otherwise going to throw out. I went to get some extra salad. Rather than giving me an additional serving, they just gave me the remaining heaping mound of cheap iceberg lettuce drenched in Italian dressing. It was seriously probably several pounds of salad. I had no intention of eating the entirety of it, but a teacher caught me eating the leftovers and said I ought to finish it, otherwise it would be so wasteful. At that point, it became a competition to prove her wrong. I had to stay probably an extra 10 minutes to finish munching down the pile of salad. When I finished, the teacher called me a pig and gave me a detention for some arbitrary reason. I relished in the look of her disgust and gleefully took the detention. Story 4. Moved to a new high school that had classrooms that were not laid out in a standard way. They had a no-tolerance tardy policy. And what happens if I show up to class 30 seconds late? Detention. You're a new kid and can't figure out where the classrooms are? Detention. On the first day, I raked up 7 of them. Keeps going on me. I figure out that detention in the school is just a 45-minute study hall where I can get my homework done in a quarter of the time it takes me to do it at home. And because I played sports, Saturday detention was waived for me. Now, worst case scenario is that I spend a minimal amount of extra time at school and my homework is done in record time. Guess how my tardiness improved under these circumstances? The principal calls me in at the end of the semester or year, I forget. He asks me if I'm trying to wallpaper his house with detention slips. I explained the situation, which went well because I had no other behavioral stuff. Principal points out that it is literally impossible for me to complete the detentions I have before I graduate. End result, I get excused from ever getting a detention for being tardy for the rest of high school. Story 5. I went to a strict technical school and we always had to sit at the same spot in the cafeteria, with no talking, nothing other than bread and beverages on the table, no schoolwork, laptops, or phones. These were just some of the rules during midday. However, once you were in the 5th or 6th year, 17, 18 years old, you were allowed to leave and taken off these lists. I went to the secretary of the school one day to discuss some initiatives we were starting in the school in terms of soccer tournaments during the week, etc. He got a call and left the room for 2 minutes. The lunch forms were open on his computer. I took my and some of my friends' names off. Next week, we slipped out of campus and were free. I felt like we'd escaped prison. It took them 2.5 months to notice. Longer if it weren't for a new person being added to our class. I got 1 day of detention in return for 50 days on the loose. Boy, was it worth it. Story 6. I had a teacher who would not let anyone go to the bathroom the entire year. So the last month of school, my friends and I got so fed up with it, I decided to take action. I brought an extra change of clothes hidden in my backpack and drank 3 bottles of water at lunch. During class that afternoon, I asked the teacher if I could use the bathroom, and of course, she responded with the usual no. So I said, okay, and just pissed all over myself and the desk. I had an extra change of clothes, so it was only uncomfortable for a bit. The look on her face was worth it. Now she lets any and everyone go to the bathroom as needed. You're welcome, America. Story 7. In high school, my dad dropped me off out front after all the buses had left. The vice principal was being an asshole for no reason and giving my dad for parking in a bus lane, when in fact he had not violated any rules. It was clear he was trying to pick a fight. After a brief heated exchange, my dad drove off, and I heard him mutter "all" under his breath. I stood in front of the building, waited for the VP to turn around and see me, held up a brazen middle finger and walked inside, ignoring his demands that I stop. I proceeded to dodge detention until I was pulled from class, flipped off the vice principal in front of the school, and it felt so great. Story 8. I was in 8th grade and our gym teacher picked 1 student per class to make his personal. I wasn't having any of it, so everything tried I was able to one-up him. His final straw was when we were throwing frisbees and he threw one at me. At the last second, he said, "Sodi, heads up," expecting me to get hit in the face. I don't know what happened, but without looking, I grabbed it, spun around, and whipped it back at him fast enough and hard enough to give him a bloody nose. He sent me to the principal's office, where she, while laughing her off, had to give me a 3-day suspension due to attacking a teacher. I found out 2 years later that he was fired from his job after that year due to multiple students from several years coming forward and claiming physical and verbal abuse. So it was totally worth it to get that asshole out of teaching. Story 9. A teacher I know had a goldfish on his desk. When the class came in for their first day, he gave them a few rules. However, he said that his most important one was that no one touches his goldfish, no matter what. Midway through the year, he begins to teach his students about how laws, whilst upheld by the government, are not always just. During this lesson, he takes the goldfish out of his bowl and throws it on the ground to let it die. My friend, who acted out of instinct, picks up this goldfish and puts it back in the bowl. He was given a detention for his offense, and the detention description was for doing the right thing. Story 10. I once instigated a whole revolution in my Catholic school. We had a horrible math teacher that nobody liked. When he took vacations, they brought a substitute teacher that was really great, so we did a petition with signatures from students of all grades for them to keep her as the official teacher. I was the head of the movement, so I went to the principal with a document to show our efforts. She laughed at me and told to get the hell out of there because students don't have the right to demand such things. I went back to class crying, 7th grade, and my classmates became really angry that the principal had treated me like that, so everybody got out of the class, started to call the other students in all classes to join them, and they did. At the end of it, everybody stood at the street in front of the school, yelling that the principal was a I was in serious trouble after that, but totally worth it. Story 11. In elementary school, I got detention because I got the last word in a snowball fight by bringing one in the classroom in my coat pocket and throwing it at my friend. Spent lunch recess writing, "I will not throw snow in school" 1,000 times for a few days. But totally worth it. Story 12. After being bullied a lot between the ages of 8 and 14, I finally snapped when I was walking away from a bully. He said, "Keep rolling, fat boy," in front of a girl I liked. I turned around in blinding anger and hit him so hard I broke a few bones on my hand and his nose. He fell back and landed in a puddle of mud and started crying. Fast forward to sitting outside the head teacher's office after I was reported for fighting, and out comes my favorite teacher, who apparently saw the whole thing and fought my corner, meaning the only punishment I got was a week of lunchtime detentions. I was never bullied again after that incident, and I just wish I had done it sooner. Edit. I just wanted to say that as an adult, this is clearly not the correct response to verbal abuse. But that being said, as a 14-year-old boy, the only option I saw at the time was to wait it out until the end of school, 2-3 years I think, to start defending myself. It's nice to read that you're not alone in your worst experiences, and I have enjoyed your stories. Lastly, to those asking, nothing really happened with my crush. I was still the fat kid, but I like to think I gained some amount of respect after that day. Story 13. I was a freshman in high school and still a religious virgin. I was asked why I was waiting to have sex until I was married. I answered with several reasons, including that I didn't want to end up with STDs. The nearby girl, who didn't really care for me, assumed I was trying to say that I didn't want to end up like her and threatened to shoot me. I calmly told her to shut her mouth. Both of us were threatened to be suspended. She cried and asked for forgiveness from the principal. I sat in his office with a straight look on my face, insisting "shut your mouth" was a sufficient response to a death threat, and all of that because she cried and I didn't. I ended up suspended while she wasn't, but it was still worth it, I guess. Story 14. Well, after setting a toilet on fire, the strap just wasn't doing it anymore, so they gave me an in-house suspension. For the unaware, the strap was a leather strap that they whipped the palm of your hands with. Good times. So for a week, I was left all alone in a small office. Just me, my homework, and a computer. I knew nothing back then. This was in 1989-1990. All I knew was some MS-DOS commands they taught me in my technology course, and how to navigate directories and stuff. Apparently, that was the server for their computer network, linking them to the school board. Something like that. There was important stuff in there anyway. I wiped everything. Transferred to a cooler school 2 weeks later. Story 15. Okay, so a little background. The teacher was a science teacher for junior high. So he taught 7th and 8th graders. His name was Mr. Butler, and I can honestly say he was the worst teacher I have ever had the displeasure of meeting. He made fun of everyone, including the one kid in my grade that was actually mentally retarded. But enough of that, on to the story. It started out like any other science class, boring. We talked about space and some other stuff I don't remember, but that's not important. After space, Mr. Butler went on to talk about states of matter. He said there were 3. Me being a smart, I raised my hand and said, no, that's not true, there are 4. They had recently been debating on adding plasma as the 4th state of matter. In front of the whole class, he says, "You know, Sam, no one likes a know-it-all." Immediately after he said that, I fired back. Is that why nobody likes your class? I was the king of 7th grade that day. I still tell people this story when they talk about ripping on their teachers. Story 16. When I was a freshman, we had to go to an assembly for the senior class president and other positions. One of the dudes running for president was rumored to have an enormous like a real-life knee slapper. Anyway, everyone else running gave 10 to 15-minute speeches about how they'd improve the school, blah blah blah. These were a big deal at my school, and the speeches are always very carefully planned and thought out. People didn't try to be funny. So this kid gets up to the podium, looks around, leans close to the microphone, and just said that the rumors are true. He walked away with the most absurd amount of confidence I've ever seen as a full gymnasium of kids 14 to 18 years old either laughed, gasped, or in the case of some girls, literally swooned. He won, but after that, he didn't do speeches anymore. Story 17. It was worth it because I learned that the American school system is terrible. You see, if you were a little shit who deviated slightly out of the norm, you'd get your kicked to detention faster than you could say unfair. In detention, they had a kind of raffle box where you would pick out your detention. Stuff like garbage pickup, sweeping the cafeteria, etc. So 8th grade, being an idiot and thinking the Giants would win, I made a bet and lost it. The loser had to bring some Windex and wash the windows. I did get caught and was sent to detention. As I shuffled around the punishments in the box, I picked one that read it. It was to wash the windows. No joke. So for the crime of washing the windows, I was punished by washing the windows with the Windex I brought.